Hello, I'm Mary Ito, and welcome to the Cram Podcast. You know, when I look at what my next guest has done, I feel lazy. Over the 30 plus years of his career as a systems design engineer, John McPhee has come up with remarkable advancements in all kinds of areas, whether it's electric and autonomous vehicles, the rehabilitation of stroke patients, surgery for hip and knee replacements, improving the performance of Olympic athletes, pro baseball, and hockey players. Oh, and of course, let's not forget, he'd also like to improve your golf swing too. And this list doesn't even cover it all. John McPhee has been called Canada's leading expert in systems dynamics. He's the Canada Research Chair in Biomechatronic System Dynamics and Professor in Systems Design Engineering at the University of Waterloo. In 2021, Stanford University named him among the top 2% of scientists in the world. He recently received the highest honor awarded to an engineer, the gold medal from the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, and he joins us from his super cool lab at the University of Waterloo. Hi, John.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
I am great, thanks. I am so eager to get started and to hear about all these remarkable creations that you and your lab have made. First up, I think we should talk about what exactly is systems dynamics.
Okay, system dynamics is an approach to studying systems in motion, hence the word dynamics. And we take a very methodical approach where we decompose the system into its component parts. We have models of all of these individual components, and then we fit them all together into a collective whole. We use mathematical theories known as linear graph theory. And with that, we can predict how things are going to move. And if we can predict how things move, then we can design better things and we can control them better.
So fundamentally, you're interested in movement. Is that right? How things move.
Absolutely. I am interested in how things move, and I am less concerned about the application area. In fact, I love many different applications.
Yeah, no, as we can tell from all the different creations that you've come up with. How did you get interested in this field?
Oh, I think I've always been interested in system dynamics and how things move. I played a lot of sports growing up, golf, basketball, soccer. I was always fascinated with how people moved and how some people moved better than other people. So I think it's always been an interest of mine.
So I want to go back because you worked for about a decade on electric and autonomous vehicles. And in fact, I know that you've got the first licensed autonomous vehicle on campus. Isn't that right?
That's right. The University of Waterloo owns an autonomous car called the Autonomous. And my colleagues and I obtained the first license from the province of Ontario to drive it on public roads.
Okay, so just because it's so common now, right? I mean, everybody's talking about electric cars and autonomous cars. What are the biggest challenges with autonomous vehicles?
Probably the biggest challenge for autonomous vehicles still is recognizing a very, very dynamic environment that's always changing. Safety is of the utmost concern. And making sure that the driver stays engaged is a big challenge. You know, we've heard stories of people falling asleep at the wheel of an autonomous car. And, you know, sooner or later, there's going to be a case comes up where the car doesn't know what to do and the driver needs to make the decision. The other big challenge, Mary, in Canada is snow and the terrible weather we have here. Because if your cameras and your LiDAR and your other sensors can't see the road at all, it's very hard to guide the car, just like it would be you and I driving through a snowstorm in the middle of the night.
Yeah. So then where are we now in terms of autonomous vehicles, would you say?
We are a lot closer than where we were 5 years ago even, but there's still a lot of work to do to make these cars 100% reliable.
Yeah. And what about electric vehicles?
Electric vehicles are the future, whether they're battery electric or whether they're fuel cell powered vehicles. I mean, just look now at the huge increase in electric vehicle sales in the last few years. And, with the current state of the planet, the sooner we transition to electric vehicles, the better.
Do you think those hydrogen fuel cells are the future?
Absolutely. And companies like Toyota are betting on it. Of course, we need a hydrogen infrastructure to support them. So we need to have more hydrogen filling stations that we can pull our car up and refill when we need to refill them. And the only output from these cars is electrical energy and water. So they're extremely clean vehicles.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think? What do you think is the time frame? When would we actually see those vehicles on the road functioning,
They're on the road now. You can buy a Toyota Mirai and you can drive it and you can refill it at a plant in a station in Mississauga. If you don't live near Mississauga, it's a little bit more challenging. So,
Yeah.
Canada has just invested a lot of money in future hydrogen economy. So, in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to see a lot more fuel cell vehicles on the road.
And I mean, you work with cars, but I know that your work has transitioned more into, I guess, the relationship between humans and machines and vice versa, right? So I'm wondering, how difficult is it to actually simulate human motion?
It's extremely difficult. With a car, we can take it apart. We can take all the parts out of it. We can measure everything we need to measure on a car. We can test even the control systems. With humans, we can't do that. We can't take them apart and put them back together. And even more challenging is the human brain and the central nervous system that controls our movement. We really do not have a good understanding of how the human motor control system works. It's a big challenge.
Well, I mean, you've done a lot of work on something called exoskeletons. Can you talk about that? Like, what are they?
Yeah, so exoskeletons are orthoses, to use the technical term, but basically they're wearable robots. So I've got one right behind me here. Anakin, our mannequin, is wearing an upper limb exoskeleton. This originally was a passive device that was basically spring-loaded that would support your arms while you worked overhead, and that reduces injury and it reduces fatigue. We've now added motors and a control system to this exoskeleton, which makes it the first active passive exoskeleton for the upper limbs. And
So,
when
okay,
we
can you give me an example? Like, what do you mean? Like, you're standing upright and you've got this exoskeleton on you. What are you doing?
Yeah, so let's say you're working underneath your car. It's up on a hoist, and you're looking overhead, and you're lifting heavy objects and moving around, or you're using a tool. It doesn't take very long for you to become fatigued, and if you push through that, you could seriously injure yourself. Shoulder injuries are one of the most common injury in Canada. With the exoskeleton, not only do we support the weight, but we also provide an assistive force and torque as you perform the movements. And as a result, you can work much longer, much more safely.
Is the person actually stronger? Like, not themselves stronger, but can they hold more weight? Can they lift more weight even with that exoskeleton?
Yes,
Really?
absolutely.
So they're
Yeah,
like
yeah,
superhuman. They're superhuman people.
yeah. They're a very early edition of Iron Man.
That's pretty exciting. Okay, so is Iron Man a possibility?
Well, if you watch the movies carefully, as I do, because I enjoy them, there's some very fundamental laws of physics being violated in those movies.
Okay,
but
maybe not.
we're definitely going to see exoskeletons in the future more commonly used. Not just for helping workers, work longer, work more safely, but also for rehabilitation. So people who are learning how to walk again, stroke patients who are learning how to use their upper limbs again. We're going to see a lot more use of exoskeletons in the future as they become smarter and lighter and just more functional overall.
You know what? I'm glad you said lighter and more functional because I don't know. One thing that I've noticed when I've seen them, and maybe these aren't the ones that you've developed, but they seem to be like kind of big and heavy and awkward. Is that one of the
Yeah.
challenges?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. I've got another. This beside me is a lower limb exoskeleton, and it's very heavy. And so, as soon as you put it on, you have all this extra weight to carry. The motors, can only react so quickly, certainly not as quickly as a human. And you got to carry around batteries with you, or you have to be tethered, and that just limits your movements tremendously. So there's a long way to go, Mary. There's a lot of good engineering work that needs to be done before we see these widely deployed.
And what is the biggest challenge to making them lighter, easier, more comfortable to wear? Is it the materials that need to be improved, or is it the actual engineering?
It's many things, actually. We need better batteries, just like our cars need better batteries, and all of our appliances need better batteries that last longer and are lighter weight, rechargeable. The designs themselves need to better mimic the human anatomy. So, for example, the knee joint on the exoskeleton is just a single pin. Our knees are not simple pin joints. They're very complex. And the exoskeleton doesn't adapt very well to human knees. It's even worse for our shoulders. Our shoulders are extremely complex joints with all kinds of movements. Typically, exoskeletons can't quite mirror that yet. So it's a combination of many things. But these are engineering challenges that we can see the solutions for with time and effort.
Now, you mentioned rehabilitation. Can you talk about that and your work in the area of rehabilitation and people who suffered strokes?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. We have this lower limb exoskeleton that I was just talking about, which would help people get up from a chair. It would help people learn how to walk again. We also have an upper limb rehabilitation robot. And if you're able to see the video, it's in the background here. After a stroke, patients often lose some control over their upper arms. And therapists work with them for weeks and months to regain full function. And it involves a lot of movements like stretching and reaching out over and over and over again, hundreds of times. It's very boring and it's repetitive. And when I hear that, I think, oh, we need a robot because robots are good at boring, repetitive things. So this robot will measure your movement and make sure you're doing the movements that the therapist wants you to move. And it measures the force you're putting out as well. And if you need assistance to perform the exercise, it will help you. And as you get stronger, that assistance will become a resistance, which helps you recover even more quickly. So this resistance training is really key to a faster recovery from a stroke or other affliction.
Mm-hmm. So how far are you along with that?
We're very far. We've developed a number of different control algorithms. We've put them on the robot. We now have ethics approval in place to test them at a local hospital. So now we just have to engage the therapists and the doctors in town and see how it performs on real patients.
Okay, so something else that I find remarkable about your work is, first we talked about cars, and now we're talking about patients and rehab and stroke. And so I'm wondering, how is it that you are able to tackle so many different areas as a systems design engineer?
Well, that's a good question. I guess the answer goes back to your first question about system dynamics. For me, these are all just different examples of the same thing. I view them all as a complex dynamic system that we can break down into individual pieces. And if we understand the individual pieces, we can put them back together and we can understand how the system operates and how the system functions. And if we can do that, we can improve the design, we can improve the control, or we can design something totally new.
Okay, but is there something that is fundamentally common to all of them? It's not as if, you've got this autonomous vehicle, over here is this exoskeleton, and we've got to start from scratch with each one of these projects. You don't have to do that, do you?
No, there's a common model underneath all of these. It's part of a field known as multibody dynamics or mechatronic multibody dynamics. And we've developed these system dynamics tools that allow us to very, very quickly create computer models and computer simulations of anything from an exoskeleton to an autonomous car to even a golfer swinging a golf club. So we can very quickly create these computer models and simulations that help us understand the underlying motions and really what's going on underneath the hood.
And even the motion of Olympic athletes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've worked with our wheelchair curling team, our wheelchair basketball team. We're working with our Olympic fencing team, and we did some nice work for the Olympic cycling team.
Yeah. So, okay, talk about the wheelchair basketball team. What was involved with that?
Sure. We did a couple of projects with the wheelchair basketball team. One thing we looked at was simple wheelchair propulsion. And so it takes a long time to set up a wheelchair, sports wheelchair for the athlete. There's a lot of adjustments made. They go off, they test it, they come back, and then they change it again. It takes maybe a month to get the right setup. So we've created these system dynamic models of wheelchair athletes moving in their wheelchairs, propelling their wheelchairs, and using these models of individual athletes, we could figure out in simulation what the ideal wheelchair setup should be. And that eliminates a whole lot of these, trial and error iterations. It allows them to get to the good setup more quickly. And that's really similar to what we did with our Olympic cycling team as well.
What did you do?
Well, we created detailed models of our Olympic track cyclists. They were performing a standing start at a velodrome in Milton, Ontario. And what we told our simulation was, okay, go as quickly as you can. Just go as fast as you can. And the optimization figured out the optimal pedaling strategy by the athlete and the optimal bicycle setup for the athlete. So where should the handlebars be positioned? Where should the seat be positioned relative to the pedals?
Is that part of pedaling strategy?
Well, when we compared our model against the actual athletes, we were able to point out some characteristics of their pedaling approach that were suboptimal. So we were able to give them quantitative feedback on their technique versus what the computer said was the optimal technique.
So do you mean, could it be where exactly their foot was positioned? Like how their leg was moving? Or what does that mean?
That's part of it. Where the seat is located affects, how you apply force to the pedals and when you apply force to the pedals. We could also look at asymmetries between the left and the right pedal because, sometimes you need it when you're starting from rest, but at other times it becomes less desirable. So with these models and this detailed information, you can really drill down into some of these specific feedback for athletes and coaches.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking when it comes to Olympic athletes, I think, we regard them as almost perfect human specimens. They're not stroke patients, right? So is it easier to work with the motion of, say, an Olympic athlete compared to someone, well, even just me, say, like a regular human or someone who's disabled?
Yeah, it's much easier, Mary, to work with Olympic athletes. In all of our work, we're often using optimization, either to improve the technique or to improve the equipment. And with Olympic athletes, when we feed our optimization algorithms with a goal, we call it a cost function, but it's basically a goal. It's basically the Olympic model: higher, faster, stronger. So we told the Olympic cyclist model to go as fast as you can, and that was it. We didn't need anything else, and it reproduced the movement of the true athlete, actual athlete, extremely well, like really, really well. But when you and I get up from a chair or when you and I reach for an object, we're probably going to do it a little bit differently from each other. And we might even do it differently today than we did yesterday. It's very difficult to know what our brains are thinking when we move. And that's the challenge with working with, we call them activities of daily living, and even more challenging when there are disabilities involved.
Right. So When you say that you are trying to emulate human movement and that is super complicated, I mean, the fact that everybody even moves slightly differently makes it even more complicated, right? So would your goal ultimately be the ability to come up, like to have an application that can be customized to every individual? And so to
You,
work, right?
you nailed it. You nailed it. We call those subject specific models or patient specific models. Ideally, you would go to your doctor's office, you would have a quick scan, and they would create a very detailed, accurate model of Mary Ito. And then we could use that to design a surgical intervention or a new prosthetic or a new exoskeleton. That would be the holy grail of a lot of this work. Subject specific, highly personalized models that we could use to support medical decisions.
Yeah, and I mean, your work, like once it gets beyond a certain level, it seems to be very multidisciplinary, right? I mean, you got to have a knowledge of anatomy, how people move, kinesiology, maybe biology, medicine. I mean, how does all that work into this?
They do all work into this, and that's where system dynamics comes in. You know, our models include mechanical components for sure. They include electrical components. They include biological components like muscles and tissues and tendons and ligaments. Um, the toughest component in all of these, and I'm including everything, including cars and robots, is the human brain. It is still a mystery to we as humans as to how the human brain functions. We know much more than we did 5, 10, 15 years ago. But how we control our bodies to produce movement, for example, which is what I'm interested in, and how we can optimize that movement after a hip replacement surgery, for example, it's really an open research question. It's a very challenging one as well.
I want to get to that hip replacement issue in just a minute because I know you've done work on that. But yeah, just still staying with athletes, I'm also interested in what you've done for example, hockey. I think your lab developed was it the first slap shot robot?
Yeah, I do a lot of work in the golf space, and I have for decades. And we test golf clubs using a golf robot, which has one arm, because that's all you need to test a golf club. And then I was thinking some years ago, well, how would we test a hockey stick? Because you hold a hockey stick in two different locations. So you would have to have two arms. And it turned out to be a much harder design problem, but we spent some years on it. We came up with a design. And in fact, we built the very first hockey slapshot robot. Our goal was to, the fastest slapshot in the NHL at the time was Chara from Boston. And so he was at 106 miles per hour. So we wanted to beat that, and we did. And that was how the hockey slapshot robot came to be. And we've been using it for the last 10, 15 years now, usually to test out new hockey stick designs.
Wow. And what about the hockey skate blade design that you and your lab came up with?
Yeah, that was another one of my extremely smart undergraduate students who came up with a new skate blade design. It's kind of like a clapper skate for speed skating. It pivots, but it pivots in the reverse way to a clapper skate. The whole idea is to maintain contact with the ice for a longer duration, so you can push a little bit longer and go faster. You know, at the time we thought this is going to work great for older guys like me who play hockey on our knees. It turns out when we tested these skates on our varsity hockey team, they actually got a little bit faster. And it was because they could push for a little bit longer. Yeah, we thought of them more as shock absorbers, but it turns out that they operate in a way that allow you to push for a little bit longer and therefore go a little bit faster. And so my student started a company, and he's been selling these blades for years now to a lot of NHL players.
What about just regular folks who play hockey just
Oh,
for
yeah.
fun? Oh,
I have a
really?
pair. Anybody can buy them. I have a pair also.
And what's the blade called?
It's called Blade Tech Hockey is the name of the
Oh,
company. And I'm sure my former student would be happy to sell you a pair, Mary.
Okay. All right. And what about, okay, and this is also very exciting. Tell us about the pitching machine that your lab developed. And it's being used now, I think, by almost every major baseball team.
That is correct. Yeah. This again, I'm so lucky to work with such smart students all the time. I love my job and largely because of the students I get to work with. So two of my students, one in particular came up with the idea for a new baseball pitching robot. The traditional ones just have two wheels and they spin like a tennis ball serving machine, and the ball comes out with
Oh,
top spin or back spin, and that's about it.
are you saying that
So
one that you just showed is a traditional one with the two wheels?
that's a
Okay.
traditional one. We started with
Right.
it, and then we improved upon it. We added a third wheel, so that gave us speed and spin, about two axes, so side spin and top spin. So now we could throw a wider variety of pitches. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle was to actually make these big roller wheels angled so that we could apply spin about that third axis. Like they call it rifle spin, like a rifle bullet spinning about its own axis. And that gave us the full picture. Now we could
Wow.
reproduce any pitch ever thrown in Major League Baseball. And all of these are recorded nowadays. They have been for years. So, if you wanted to reproduce a Garrit Cole fastball from 2019, we could throw that exact same pitch now.
Wow. So just tell me, like, it has different kinds of spins. I mean, how does that all work? Can you describe what the pitches
Yeah.
are like? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say we have a particular pitch. We want to throw a curve ball to the top left corner of the strike zone. We will map that back to the ball launch. So we will throw the ball with exactly the right speed and spin so that the ball trajectory is exactly the ball trajectory we want, which is the one that the pitcher threw that we're trying to reproduce. Or we can throw pitches that have never been thrown before, because some of the pitches we throw, no human could ever throw, because we could put more speed and more spin on the ball than a human can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so,
Do you have Shohei Otani's pitches in there?
yes.
Do you?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, unless you're a professional baseball player, I don't recommend standing next to the plate while that pitch is thrown. I've tried it and it's very scary.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
okay. So that's in full use now
That's in
by
full
teams.
use.
Yeah. By baseball
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah. So my students started a company. They keep doing this, and the company's called Traject Sports. They've made, dozens of these very incredible baseball pitching robots that project a video of the pitcher on a screen attached to the robot. So you see the actual pitcher throwing to you, and the ball
Ah.
comes out of the pitcher's hand exactly when it does in real life. So it's incredibly immersive. It's incredibly real life. And you can train against any pitcher you want to before you face them in an actual game.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because you never used to be able to, right? It was not allowed that you could have a robot, I guess in a sense, coaching you in between innings so that you'd be well prepared for the next picture that came up. You couldn't do that before.
You couldn't, we can't say a robot because there's only one of these. Our
Okay.
robot,
The robot.
our robot. There's only one. It used to be that you couldn't use it during a game. So if the other team changed their pitcher, you couldn't run down to the training area and train and warm up on the new pitcher coming in so that you would do better
Right.
against them. Major League Baseball just changed that rule so that now you can, because Major League Baseball wants to see more offense. They want to see more runs scored. And so it is now allowed to train against the new incoming pitchers during a game.
So, okay, just by that fact alone, doesn't that mean then every team has to have a robot? Otherwise, wouldn't they be at a disadvantage?
Absolutely, absolutely. I haven't seen the
Hmm.
latest customer list, but I'd be very surprised if any Major League Baseball team does not have the robot at this point.
Well, then that means your student has a monopoly on this.
Well, that's the purpose of a patent. The purpose of a patent is to protect
Ah,
your intellectual property, so that you can sell your product to customers, and that's what my two students are doing right now.
oh, that's
should say
amazing.
for,
Okay.
should say former students. They graduated quite a few years ago, and they're not students anymore. They're highly successful engineers and business people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I said earlier, you've been doing this for over 30 years. You've had many students come through your lab. It must be so satisfying to see so many of them doing well, successful at their, inventions.
It is so satisfying. Yeah, and I could tell you so many stories about the successes my students had. I had one student come to visit me. Actually, she worked on this walking robot that's in behind me. She worked on this 25 years ago. Came back for 25th reunion. She's now one of the heads of R&D at Meta AI, and she got late. She was late to our meeting, and she said, "I really apologize, but I just had to take a call from Mark Zuckerberg." So I said, okay, well, that's okay. You can stand me up. You can stand me up for Mark Zuckerberg. But that's the kind of success our students have been having. And,
Mhm.
and they've all been really wonderful, collegial people as well, who worked really well within this sort of team environment that is the culture of my lab.
Yeah. And I have to say, just because I know some engineers, I have friends who are engineers, I don't think engineers get enough credit. They're the people who work behind the scenes, making things happen, advancing the field. Certainly, I mean, this is just you're one example of how they're advancing the field. There are so many others. But, if I was to ask someone, gee, could you name a famous engineer? Like, okay, maybe they could name one, but not many. Do you know what I mean? Not
I
many,
know what you mean.
not like architects, not like, doctors, not like, there's something, I don't know, engineers. There's something about that profession. You're kind of quietly there in the background doing your thing.
Well, that's very true, especially in North America. Other countries put famous engineers on their currency.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to have a 10 franc note from Switzerland that had Leonard Euler on it. Other countries celebrate their engineers perhaps more than Canada does. But you're right, Mary. I have to agree with you. If you look at our economy, much of it is driven by, we used to be a resource-based economy, right? And we're turning more and more to technology. There's some very smart Canadians who have been developing some really amazing innovations. And a lot of those are creating new businesses that are hiring people and increasing our quality of life. So, yes, I think engineers should get a bit more credit than they do these days.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. I definitely want to go back to something you brought up because this is a very, very important area, and that would be hip and knee surgeries, right? We have
Okay.
so many of those surgeries that are done every year in Canada. I mean, can you just talk about the importance of improving that procedure?
Yeah, so this is a project we did with another University of Waterloo spinoff. It's a company called IntelliJoint Surgical. They make tools for surgical navigation. So they basically track all of the tools that a surgeon uses during a hip replacement operation or a knee replacement operation. So they tell the surgeon exactly where they are inserting that replacement into the human body. So, maybe the ball going into the femur, or maybe the cup that sits into your pelvis. They tell the surgeon where they are putting them, but the tools don't tell the surgeon where they should be putting them. And this comes back to that conversation we had earlier about personalized models, because everybody's different. And it turns out that the current guidelines for where you should be putting these implants don't work for everybody. In fact, in some cases, they are very poor guidelines for individuals, particularly if you have a stiff spine, if you have a fused spine, or even if you just have a pelvis that tilts a little bit differently from the rest of the world. And so, long story short, we developed personalized models using X-ray images and medical imaging. And with that, we're now able to advise our collaborators, the company and their surgeons, where these implants should be going for different people.
Right. And I guess even more important because a good percentage of those surgeries just don't work out, right? And they have to be redone because they were in the wrong place.
They have to be redone because they were put in slightly the wrong place. And so when the person bends forward, for example, to get out of a chair, all of a sudden there's contact between these two pieces of the implant that are not supposed to touch each other. And it leverages right out of the joint, and you have a hip dislocation. And then all of a sudden you have to go back and get another surgery done to fix it, and all of the rehabilitation and pain and suffering that goes along with it. If you put it in the right place in the first time, you avoid that.
So how far are you with that?
We're very far with that. We've already got 2 patents filed. One is on the basically helping surgeons determine where the implants should be put in the human body during surgery. And the second follow-up patent is more related to the medical imaging using AI, where we identify the specific properties of a patient using machine learning technologies from standard X-ray images.
Okay. I'm asking because, of course, I want that in place by the time I need a knee and hip surgery done. So,
okay. Well, look for another startup company in the very near future. That's all I can say.
Do you know what? You seem to be like a guy who, if I got a problem, I'm going to give it to you. You just seem to get turned on by solving problems.
Yeah, that's a problem in itself. I should be saying no more often than I do. I tend to take on more work than I should, but if somebody comes to me with a cool problem where things are moving, I really have a hard time saying no. I'm extremely curious. I have great people to work with, and at the end of the day, it's a lot of fun.
Do you know one thing I've been thinking about, and I don't know, maybe I've been reading too many sci-fi novels and watching too many movies, but so you've been exploring this relationship for quite a while between humans and machines, and of course, humans and machines has been a lot of sci-fi literature, etc. But I have to say, I think also people, like part of us innately, we do have a bit of a fear and suspicion about technology as well, right? So this fear that we have about the advancement of technology, the advancement of AI, will we actually become more robot than human in the future? Is that something that we should be paying attention to or be concerned about?
I think we should be concerned about AI and its deployment and how it's used and where it's going. And we're now seeing governments responding very aggressively to potential threats from AI. I don't think humans are going to become more robotic. We're just going to keep using tools like we have been. Our tools are getting smarter. In the early days, it was a club and a wheel. And now our tools are exoskeletons and autonomous cars. But at the end of the day, they're just tools, and we need to use them effectively and smartly. On the software side with AI, yeah, definitely. We have to be careful about where that's going in the future. But now that we have some very smart people alerted to this, it doesn't keep me up at night. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's reassuring. So what do you think then as far as, advancements in this field? What do you see in the near future as far as, the next innovation? Like where is this taking us?
Well, I see a few directions. Since we were just talking about AI, one thing AI can't do right now very well is design a new robot, for example. I mean an engineering level design that obeys the laws of physics, not a nice sketch on paper. It just doesn't have enough knowledge of physics and math and engineering decision making. And, that sort of expertise is very hard to encode in an algorithm. But I think we are going to see more use of machine learning to support engineering design, but I don't think it will ever replace it. For me, I think we really need some big advances in understanding the human brain. In my particular case, the human motor control system. Why do we move like we do? What is behind the decisions we're making? I love sports, and some of the decision making by elite athletes is phenomenal. How quickly and well they make decisions. I think we need to understand the brain better, and that's going to pay off when we start looking at people who don't think so quickly, like older people like me, whose reaction times are slowed. Maybe we have some disability. The more we understand the brain, the more we can do with it. And all of this work I do in biomechatronics with exoskeletons and so on, the brain is continuously adapting to the machine as it uses it. Human brain is amazing what it can do, and it's going to adapt very quickly to the machine. The machine needs to adapt back. And so we need smarter machines that understand what the human is trying to do, what the human is doing, which keeps changing every day they use it. And it needs to adapt in harmony with the user.
I can see you just loving going into work. This, all these different problems, all these different challenges, working in so many different fields. It must be very exciting making such a difference.
Yeah, it really is, especially when I can spend time with students. That's the favorite part of my job is discovering new things and working through a problem with students, and seeing them grow and mature and become world leaders in their fields. It's extremely satisfying.
I really enjoyed this discussion, John. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us and also letting us have a peek into your lab.
Well, thank you, Mary. I love your show, and I really appreciate being on your show. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you. That is John McPhee. He is the Canada Research Chair in Biomechatronic System Dynamics, Professor in Systems Design Engineering at the University of Waterloo. He's been called Canada's leading expert in system dynamics. And if you'd like to learn more about the innovative work that John and his lab are doing, please visit our show notes. That's it for the CRAM podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. And please follow us on social. Our handle is @CRAM Ideas. We'd really appreciate a review as well. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here next time.